Now, I don't normally leave the evaluation bar on when I analyse these games, but I had to for this one because the game just swings back and forth, so many blunders, culminating in the most insane finish, leading to a shocking checkmate. Now, Hans Niemann has the white pieces in this game, played in the World Blitz Championship 22, and his opponent is the strong Georgian Grandmaster Giga Quparadze. He's actually playing today in the Georgian Chess Championship. It's the 10th of January 23. So let's see what happened. Hands with white, he goes pawn to d4. Knight f6 on the board, c4, e6, and now Hans avoids the mainline Nimzo-Indian. He goes knight to f3 here, and we see bishop b4 check, and we're heading down the Queen's Indian lines now. So the knight blocks, we see pawn b6 preparing to fianchetto the bishop. Now a3 puts a question to this one, and we see it chopping on d2, the bishop recaptures, and the idea of black giving up the bishop pair is to go for more control over this e4 square, plus of course rapid development, get that king safe, fight for the centre. Now bishop b7, Hans goes g3, the king castles, bishop to g2, and now d6, the classic move here in these structures, preparing c5, sometimes e5, castles now from Hans, knight beats d7, and the rook hits c1. Hans could have gone b4 there, he just delays that move for a long moment in this game, and we see a5 now clamping on it. Queen c2 now played, but this is a bit of a strange queen manoeuvre because after bishop e4, the queen then comes to c3 and it looks slightly oddly placed on that square. Giga now gets a bit of an initiative with queen e7, rook fe1, another slightly strange looking move, and then c5. So Hans has to strike back or he's going to be much worse. You don't want a closed manoeuvring position when you've got bishops against knights. So he goes b4, let's open the board for the bishops. Pawn captures, pawn recaptures, and now h6 just waits on the position. We see rook a1, and rook fc8 now is a bit soft from Giga. As I'm highlighting here, actually taking on d4 is one of his better moves, changing the pawn structure, because after rook fc8, we see Hans capturing here, pawn recaptures. The reason Giga captures away from the centre, by the way, which you're normally taught not to do, is because he doesn't want to give Hans an outside pass b-pawn. So now after this one takes, we see pawn b5. So Hans has now created a better pawn structure. The board's a bit more open for his bishops, and he's soon going to win the a file. So he's now slightly better again. And now this move, pawn e5, is a bit of a loose move because it opens this diagonal for the bishop, and also that pawn can become a bit of a target in a moment, as we'll see. So bishop h3 from Hans immediately capitalizes. Now rook d8 breaks the pin, but we see captures here, the rook swings back and Hans challenges. And after takes with check, queen takes, we can see Hans has won the file. He could be invading with that queen if the bishop ever moves. Queen d6 looks for counterplay down the open d file. Now bishop c3, and this is one of the problems with this pawn, and this is why the bishop now captures on f3. Pawn recaptures, it alleviates the pressure here, and now Giga actually abandons that e5 pawn. He goes queen d3, hits these 2 points. Now you can't defend both, of course, so Hans carries on with his plan of attacking that black king if he can, and there's only one move here for black to keep a rough balance in the position, and the move is knight takes on e5. Now the reason this is good is that you eliminate one of those attacking bishops. Now you take on f3, and actually, although white can go, say, bishop f5, looking to cut the king's escape, then go queen b8 check, hit this pawn, etc., well, black can either drop back to a8 here as I'm drawing, or even give this check, king goes, then queen d8, glue everything together, should be okay. But Giga misses this one. He doesn't take on e5. He goes queen takes on c4, looks logical to try and get that c-pawn going, but now Hans starts attacking. Queen a8 check, and now you can't go king h7 here. There's actually a tactic that wins the game on the spot, look at the eval bar, what's the move for white here, and just while you're looking for that one, very quick shout out to Aim Chess. If you do want to improve your chess rapidly in 23, then check them out, use the link below, they'll use your game data to tailor a training plan, and it's free to sign up. But if you then want to go premium, you can use the code EPIC at checkout to get a good discount. But back to the game, what would white play here? It's bishop f5 check, because after pawn blocks, you then just chop this one simply, knight recaptures, well, you shouldn't go knight recaptures, you get mated, but if the knight recaptures, this is the tactic, and so you'd be losing a piece after bishop takes on d7. So king h7, no good, that's why the knight blocks, and now the bishop comes to d6, threatening mate. You can't come here and defend, or the bishop simply takes and the knight can't recapture, it's pinned, and so that's why this one has to stumble back to h7, defend like this, but Hans can now start turning the screw, but he doesn't quite do so in the right way. So he goes queen a8 to defend this pawn which was attacked and maintain the pin, but actually his best was queen to c6 immediately, because after queen d4, hitting this bishop, preparing to run the pawn, Hans now goes queen c6 to hold this one, come behind the pawn, and he's lost the tempo there. So c4 played, real counterplay now, f4 from Hans, possibly with ideas of bishop e5, then covering back, but after pawn c3 anyway, this move is no good, or you're running into this check. King goes, pawn c2, and that's looking deadly. So instead, in this position here, we had bishop f5 to cover this c2 square, twice now with the queen, and after g6 kicking that bishop, not best by the way, the bishop dropped back here, and now after queen d2, it came here. So the problem with black's moves there is they've slightly improved this piece, which is now staring at the king. And there's big threats in the air, which black doesn't parry. The best move here was apparently queen b2 to pressure this bishop. But black plays knight f6, a natural looking move, but look at the eval bar now swing. So what's the tactic here for white to have a big advantage? So the move to play is bishop takes on f8, which Hans does find. Now the king can't recapture, or then you simply take on f6 and white's much better. You don't even have time for c2 because you're getting checkmated on f7. This is the problem. So after bishop takes on f8, we saw queen d4 covering this knight, and now Hans has so many different ways to win. He could just go bishop e7, save that one, much better. He can go queen c7, which he plays in the game, threatening checkmate here. And after knight d5, blocking the bishop's diagonal, which was played, again there's multiple ways to win. One of the simplest is to go queen to c8. Any move along this back rank is good, because you're setting up these discovered threats, mating threats, using the bishop and queen, and say the king steps away, well then the queen can just zigzag its way in. So now you hit the pawn, you can come back, you can come again. If the king goes again, well now you take and it's mate in 5. You know, there's these different mating ideas basically using queen and bishop, and they're just unstoppable if you put this queen on the back rank, create the discoveries. But what Hans did was just completely blunder. He takes on d5. Now, to be fair to him, I mean, look at that eval bar. If the queen recaptures immediately, watch the eval bar spring back up, because now you can save your bishop, you're still a piece up, there's still mating threats. But what Hans had missed was this in between check. King has to go to g2, then you take the bishop with check. And now because of this, you can now pick up the bishop and you're not a piece down. Now we see this check first, then this one, then the bishop captured, and now we head for this endgame with captures here, which just goes nuts. Look at the clock times, Hans has got literally 6 seconds. Now, he did have the opportunity here to go queen h8 check. King goes, he can pick up a pawn, but then black also checks, king goes, black picks up a pawn. How do you evaluate this? Well, different game. Still black has the chances to win with the outside pawn. But instead Hans plays pawn to g4. Now his idea is that if you go queen f1 check, he can sit the king there, the pawn doesn't block it, he defends this pawn. But we didn't have the check. Giga sidesteps his king, he stops the queen invasion. Now we see the check, king h7, queen c7 hits the pawn, so this one defends the pawn with check, king g2, and now this b pawn starts advancing. So Hans centralizes, he's supporting f5, he wants to rip open that king. b4, f5, and now queen c4 takes with check, and now the king recaptures to stop the perpetual checks. If you take with the pawn, as I'm drawing here, then the queen starts checking using these two highlighted red squares. So now we see queen f5 check, king g7, queen e5 check, the king comes back, and now Hans decides to push another pawn, pawn g5, but again he's overlooked something. So if black takes straight away, you take with check and this is fine. Again, there's actually perpetual options. But what we see here is queen c6 check, a Zwischenzug. Now when this blocks and pawn captures, you can't now take with the queen, give the check, because the black queen blocks and you're actually forcing those queens off. The queen is pinned to the king, and then the b pawn is running through as I'm indicating there. So instead we see king f2, queen c2 check, the king goes, queen d2, and this is a technically lost position, but so many twists still to come. So queen e8 check, king goes, check, king goes, another check, but now it finds a home here, and queen e8 now from Hans going after this pawn. Now black starts checking, king goes, king g7 defends, queen b5 back, comes behind this pawn, another check, king goes, and now after these few more checks and king moves, we see a moment here where black can really force through this win. So you can go queen e3 check, king moves, and then pawn b3. And now the pawn is just getting so close, the king is too exposed, this is winning. But Giga doesn't do it, he carries on with the runaround. A few more checks, and soon the king lands on h3 here, as we'll see, and then the pawn advances, but in a moment things go wrong. Hans checks, and now a big blunder. If you come to g6 or h7, you're still winning, you can escape checks. But when you come back here, now you can check from b8, and you're picking up this pawn. Terrible blunder. King g7, Hans takes the pawn, it's completely drawn, or is it? So now we see a ton more moves, which I'm going to whiz through here. This is about a 113 move game or something, but basically black is trying to press here. You know, a perpetual can be taken at any moment. Because black's got these two connected pawns, that's what Giga's pushing for. He's also got the extra time. So we'll run this through, we get all the way around here, and in a moment, Hans actually sneaks his queen in round the back and gets very real counterplay now. So the king comes here, now another check. Then we get to this position in just a moment after check, where the pawn now blocks, and here's a big blunder by Giga. He has to stay in contact with this e7 square, but he doesn't. He comes here, he's looking at f3, but now Hans checks, and actually he's picking up these pawns. They've overextended. Whether the king comes to the h-file, you can always force it back and win the pawns, but it steps up here, we have check, it goes, and now these pawns drop off the board. Completely one endgame for white, 2 pawns up. How does Hans do it? Well, he checks here, king g7. Now he pushes this one, check, king goes, queen c1, check here, king goes, and now the shocking move, the terrible blunder, walks into mate in 2. Hans just can't help but laugh. He goes king to g5, and look at the eval bar swing. Where's the checkmate for black? Well, the move to play, the only check, is queen g1. Hans just laughs and resigns. Wherever the king goes, it's mate. You come here, this is mate. You come here, this is mate. Come here, and again, checkmate. Just a devastating finish for Hans Niemann. If you want to see another one of his astonishing games, then check out this video on screen. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.